Happy Tuesday, folks. It's Tactard Ted. How's it going? It is Tuesday, 13th of September. And how's it going, folks? Well, got a question for you. You know how, like, terrorist organizations keep a kill list? You know, even some terrorist organizations like to put their kill lists on the internet. They do. And, you know, one very prominent kill list that's out there on the internet has people like Roger Waters, various U.S. politicians, Turkish businessmen, Russian businessmen, British people, and guess what? The terrorist organization that runs that are the Ukrainians. Yes, the Ukrainians. They do all sorts of wonderful things. They are our partners in democracy. You know, we keep getting told they're so democratic. They're just like us. Really? Usually in the United States, if you have a kill list, you're either a criminal or a terrorist. It's pretty simple. You know, if I decided that I didn't like a bunch of people and I wanted to kill them, and I put up a list on the internet, these are people who have betrayed me, these are people who need to die, I expect I would probably be getting a visit from the FBI, or one of the other alphabet soups, or maybe even my state and local law enforcement would be wanting to pay me a visit and ask me what the fuck am I thinking by doing stupid fucking shit like that. But no, the Ukrainians do it. They have a website out there that they put people up on. Daria Dugina was on that list, and after she was liquidated, they put in Ukrainian liquidated in a big red X over her face. Now, do you remember us doing that with people we've been at war with? I don't exactly remember us doing that. It's not something we do. And apparently it's not having very good effects for the Ukrainian war effort, because they've started to place Turkish businessmen on their kill lists. And they not real happy that some of these folks are doing business with a country they don't dig. Now, you may ask yourself, well, Ted, why is this a problem? Well, it kind of is a problem because the Turks are one of the main suppliers of the Bayraktar, well, the only supplier of the Bayraktar drone, but one of the major drone producers that supplies the Ukrainians. And the Ukrainians are really bad about biting the hand that feeds them. I really think it's quite interesting that we are continuing to pump money into a country that has Americans on the kill list. Why are we supporting a country that has people in our country on a kill list? That's a good question, isn't it? You don't think some of those folks on those kill lists pay taxes? Yeah, yet their tax money is being used to fund a country that wants to see them dead. Kind of ironic, isn't it? Kind of hypocritical. But yet we do that for whatever reason. And we're continuing to do that. Well, the Turks are not going to continue to do that. The Turks are a little niffed right now in demanding that Kiev explain what the fuck is going on and why they're allowed to target Turkish civilians. Now, the Biden administration won't lift a finger to help me or you. The Bidens aren't going to question why they're allowed to be Americans on the kill list. The Brits aren't going to question it. The Germans aren't going to question it. Yeah, and there are Germans on that kill list. Mainly journalists that the Ukrainians don't dig. Journalists who give an opinion that don't quite match. Now, we have freedom of speech in our countries. Why are we not in support of our own people? Why are we going to support somebody else from another country in their war when they want to kill some of our people. That seems a little hypocritical, doesn't it? You know, I thought freedom of speech in this country was a cornerstone of our democracy. Apparently, the Ukrainians don't understand democracy in the same terms that we do. They do not understand human rights in the same way we do. And I just wanted to start off with that, folks, because I find that a little repugnant that the Ukrainians are allowed to operate such lists on the internet for everyone to see and make a big deal about it. And the fact that the Ukrainian government doesn't ask them to take it down shows their complicity with them. That's really simple. In fact, I've been told by certain folks that that is the Ukrainian government doing that. It's part of their outreach to keep support amongst some of their more radical factions. And I mean, it's great now that the Ukrainians have retaken parts of Kharkiv, that they are arresting police and school teachers. Why? Because they dared to continue doing their job when the Russians occupied their towns. Yep, the teachers decided to teach, so therefore they're collaborators. The policemen decided to keep order, so therefore they are collaborators. And these folks are being arrested, hunted down, interrogated, beaten, and all sorts of unpleasant things are happening, maybe up into including death. You know, that's how the democracy works. You know, that's how great Democrats those folks are. Democracy would be respecting the rights of voters, such as the folks of Donetsk and Lugansk, who decided they didn't want any parts of the Ukrainian government and voted to be independent. Now the democracy says, we're not going to allow you independence. Democracy that will not allow their people to say, fuck you, we're done, is not really democracy. It's just a veiled dictatorship. It is a veiled authoritarian regime. That's what it is. Call it what it is. I call it what it is. And since I was mentioning Kharkov, a lot of interesting things have came to light. Now, I've told you, and I mentioned it yesterday again, that I had not been compelled or was convinced that the Russians wanted to hang on to the Kharkov region. A lot of the towns and stuff, they never really had Kharkov, but towns like Izium and some of the other smaller hamlets. Izium's the biggest town that the Ukrainians have, quote unquote, retaken. It is a town of about 40,000. For example, most suburbs of Washington, D.C. have a higher population than Izium. Okay. So it's not like they've recaptured great population centers. But they have recaptured. They have retaken. I would say retaken instead of recaptured, or recaptured or captured. The problem is, from what's emerging, if true, and I've talked to a couple of people who work in intelligence recently, and I have no reason to doubt them, but I still say if true, because there's many a slip between a cup and a lip. People make mistakes, people misread things. According to these folks, two folks, different folks telling me the exact same thing, basically, that they believe now the Russians planned on ceding that territory. And the reasoning for that was very simple. The Russians continued to draw down forces in the region even after the reports in late August about Ukrainian troops massing in the Kharkov region. In other words, when the storm hit, when the great Ukrainian offensive in the Kharkov region took off, there were about 500-600 troops in Izium now. Prior to that, there had been several thousand. And they were still drawing down after knowing that the Ukrainians were going to make an offensive. If this is true, then it only proves that Russia was already deciding to leave the territory. And it almost sounds, if true, once again, I'm caveating it, that the Ukrainians punched air. They hit an area where there wasn't a whole lot, and the Russians had redeployed everything to a river, the Oskal River, where they had a little better chance of a organized defense, or at least a stronger defense, because if you've been drawing down your troops and you don't have a lot of troops in the area, you're just letting your people sit there to be attrited, to be killed, to be destroyed, to become fertilizer. And how would you put this? It's a lot smarter to pull your people back than to let them die. The only downside to this has been the filtration, where they're coming in and they're arresting people who said anything nasty about Zelensky or continued to do their jobs in these regions after the Russians occupied them. And if this is true about the Russian drawdown in that area, and this may be coping, I don't deny that that's a possibility. Unfortunately, the two guys I talked to this morning both both work for Western intelligence, so they are not what I would call, Ukrainian haters in the least. I wouldn't call them Russian fanboys. So their summation was that the Russian troops, when the attack came in Kharkov region, were outnumbered 8-1. 8-1, that's a pretty substantial deficit. I'm not sure how you come back from a deficit like that. I can remember my young days as a young infantryman in the United States Army. We would never plan, depending on what kind of our reconnaissance does, we would never plan to attack an enemy that we didn't outnumber 3-1. And we preferred 4-1 to 5-1 odds for a successful attack, because you want overwhelming superiority in numbers and firepower. And apparently, from what we're understanding, the Ukrainians had that when they hit. We also understand that there are not a large number, and I look at some of the more ghoulish Telegram channels and Twitter, and there aren't a whole lot of pictures coming out of that offensive of Russian dead. The Ukrainians love to post up their photos of Russian dead. They love to do that. And the Russians have started playing that game. You got Graham Phillips, a month ago, was on the territory of a hog farm where a bunch of Ukrainians were destroyed. And the Ukrainians were offered to come back and police up their dead. They refused to do so. And Graham put out on Rumble a really disturbing video of hogs munching down on Ukrainian soldiers. And like I said, the Ukrainians don't shy away and they love posting pictures of dead Russians. They also love, or up until they got caught on it, they used to love putting up pictures of how they were mistreating their captives. There's just not a lot of that on Telegram these days. Now, maybe it has something to do with the infrastructure hits, with Russia taking down their electric grid. That might be an explanation. I don't know that Russia started taking out their cell networks, because let's face it, a lot of this stuff goes on through Telegram, through their phones and everything. But interestingly enough, one Ukrainian soldier recently said that they simply don't use their cell phones anymore because every time they switch their cell phone on, it seems like they receive fire soon afterwards. Now, that just may be how much firepower is going on against, or how much artillery strikes are being launched against Ukrainian forces. It also may indicate that the Russian electronic warfare and surveillance is super active, and they're picking up cell phones being switched on in Ukrainian positions, and they're homing in and launching fire missions against these folks. But it all comes down to what is true. Recently, a report said that it was supposedly leaked from the Ministry of Defense that Ukrainian soldiers were not capable of being trained to NATO standards. Now, I had a person who I'd served with, who I respect very much. He pointed out some grammatical errors in the report. I'm going to have to sit down and reread it because I live at 90 miles an hour and see if I can see those reports. But I will tell you this much. I would tend to believe the report. I mean, it's at least as real as the Ghost of Kiev. Let's face it, there's been so much disinformation from the Ukrainian side that if you take that with that, if you all take that as gospel, then why not take the other side as gospel as well? I tend to not take either side as gospel. I'll report sometimes things that I think are questionable. Why do I do that? Well, I do that because if we're going to report stuff that is absolutely nonsense, like the pensioner shooting down a jet with his shotgun, then why not post all the ridiculousness? I mean, we took verbatim that the great defenders of Snake Island were all martyred, and it turns out, no, they weren't. People bought into Ghost of Kiev, which turned out to be utter bullshit. Supermodels or beauty queens joining the army, which they did not. Airsoft princesses is what it turned out to be. If we're going to take all those things and we're going to deal with them, then why not? Why not accept the propaganda on both sides? But I digress. The main reason I would believe that report is because whether you want to admit it or not, there is a huge difference in lifestyle, customs, ethics between the West and the East. Now, you can deny it all you want. And it's really funny that, at least in Western literature, Western news, we tend to, we have this preconceived notion that the Russians are backwards, they're brutish, they are not intelligent. And why do we have this? Why do we have this? Why do we think this way? I can tell you, folks. It's because we are not wired to understand them. We aren't. I will tell you, from having Russians in my family, and I mean Russians who were born in the Soviet Union, they don't think the same way we do, folks. Ukrainians aren't that different. They were born, they're a product of the Soviet Union. They're a product of Eastern Europe. They do not think like the people in the West do. Nobody thinks like Americans. I will tell you that for a fact. We are our own particular breed. And we think a lot of the way a lot of the world views us is we think very foreign to them. We have different ethics, we have different beliefs, we have different motivations. And I will tell you that training somebody to standards that were built for Western Europeans and Americans doesn't work for everyone. And we are attempting to train folks to a standard that works for us that may not work for them. And that's why I tend to believe it. Now, it may be utter bullshit. Who knows at this point? But what I will tell you what is not utter bullshit, and I will say it again, and I will say it again. This offensive, where everybody says Russians are throwing down their equipment and running for the hills, it's only going to hasten the demise of the Ukrainians. When you start losing thousands of your trained men in a publicity stunt offensive, you have less folks to fight later on to help defend. You are basically attriting your own army. For what? For propaganda? So Zelensky can have a few more bags of Coke delivered tonight? No, that's what you're doing. Because the Russians aren't going to leave. Maybe you bloodied the Russians' nose and maybe you didn't. I think what's important to understand is you may or may not have bloodied the nose of the Russian army. What you have done is you bloodied the pride of the Russians. And now there are a lot of calls and a lot of discussion for full mobilization. And once full mobilization happens, once they've declared war, you're going to see all hell break loose. And I'll make a little side prediction. If Russia declares war, you will see Ukraine cut off from the Polish border. You want to know how? Belarus will enter the war. Belarus will enter the war from their border and pinch off the supply route for Western weapons. That's my prediction now. Maybe it'll come true, maybe it won't. But you got to keep watching. Nobody's talking about what's going on the Belarusian border. And maybe the activities on the Belarusian border are simply to fix Ukrainian troops in place. Maybe they're not. I also know that there are still large numbers of Russian troops on the territory of Belarus. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one plays out. But you'll never know till it happens. We'll have to guess. Anyhow, folks, I'm going to go ahead and cut it off. I'm over my time period that I like to be. Hopefully tomorrow I'll get to talk about the failure of the price caps on energy. How that's simply not going to help the situation. In fact, if anything, it's going to aggravate the energy situation in the West, meaning Europe. You know, the Americans, we're only going to have our prices go up. After the election, you can be sure that we're going to quit pouring away our strategic reserve to keep prices artificially low, and prices are going to skyrocket. Why? Because, well, if you're stupid enough to vote for Biden's party or rhinos, there'll be no need to keep you happy. They know you have a short memory. They're more than willing to let you suffer. And then before the next election, we'll figure out another way to get energy prices down. Anyhow, folks, you have a wonderful day. I will talk to you later. Bye.